Welcome to another Conversations in Innovation. I am Jay Mohan, the Executive Director of the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at Harrisburg University. The basic premise for the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship is to empower innovators to build successful ventures. So anybody who is starting a company or has an idea and wants to flesh out, you are welcome to reach out to us and we can support you with networking, idea, strategy around how to build a successful venture. And as part of the center's different efforts, we have started this whole Conversations in Innovation a few months back, where the idea is to bring together innovators from other successful companies, big and small industries, to come together and talk about the cool ideas that they are working on. And hopefully you guys can get inspired or even pick up a thread that you can take and develop your own innovations in-house. Having said that, the areas we have touched on recently with the pandemic has been across the board. And so today we want to talk about parents and schools trying to figure out how to deal with this pandemic situation. So we have been hearing about hybrid classes, virtual classes, in-person classes. So today I have the privilege of bringing together three incredible people. So I have Ann Palmer, who is an executive at a company called Celerity, but she's also a single mom. Richard Fry, who is a superintendent at one of the school systems. Sherry Powell, who is a teacher there. And so without further ado, let me welcome all three of them to the session, and we can get started to hear about how they are dealing with this and what the future looks like for them and for the schools.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rich Fry, Superintendent of Schools. This is my 17th year as Superintendent in the Big Spring School District. To Jay's point, he used the example of Fairfax County. My first 9 years in education, I was in Prince William County, Virginia, just south of Fairfax. So some of the things we talk about, all public schools are going through challenges, obviously, since March, but it's a unique challenge based on the demographics of districts and where you were at prior to March. So we're excited to talk about that today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Fry. So, Anne, you want to give a little bit about, your role, both your working role and your mom role, right?
Well, I think it's hard to tell which one comes first. Some days I like to joke that I'm always working and I'm never working. Also, we're all living at work, right? Aren't we, these days? My mom role, I'm a single mom. I have a son who's 11 years old in Lower Dolphin School District here in the Hummelstown, Hershey area. And then my other, more consuming role, my son is a pretty easy keeper. So I work as a business development director for Celerity, a consulting company based in McLean, Virginia. I'm really excited to contribute to this conversation because one of the things that I think about a lot is the way that technology opens doors for new experiences. And since March, interacting with the little green blinking eye on your camera, as all of us are, represents both new opportunities and significant limitations for an area like education. Jay, thanks.
Well, thanks, Anne. So, Sherry Powell, the teacher's perspective is really interesting here. So tell us a little bit about
I am a wife and a mother. My husband and I are celebrating our 23rd anniversary soon. I have two children, a 17-year-old who attends Big Spring High School, and I have a 21-year-old who is the owner and operator of his own construction business. As a teacher, this is my 25th year of teaching, 21 of which are at Big Spring High School. I'm also the department chairperson for the business department and have been for the last 17 years. This year for me is really, it's an anxious year, but it's also an exciting year. There are a lot of things that I've been wanting to do better in my classroom, things I've wanted to be more willing to change, and this year has forced me to do some of those things and kind of jump out of my comfort zone. Right before this panel discussion, I was recording a video for my class to watch while I'm not there. So, those kinds of things are a little out of my comfort zone, but it's helping me to grow, as well as all of the, the things that are making me more anxious because everything has changed. But it is good that things are getting better.
So, touching on something that Anne mentioned, I'm coming to Dr. Fry, but, you mentioned about the little blink on the camera. The funny thing, when we started the conversations in innovation, I used to say, now we are pretty much all the time on the camera. And then, when we started this, you couldn't even get a haircut. So you are in the worst shape, but you are always on camera, which is kind of like, the weirdest thing to happen. So, now taking that to the next level, now everybody is on camera so much that there is, all the Zoom fatigue or, Google fatigue or whatever you call that. So from a school system, so let's start there, Dr. Fry. So what's been the biggest panic or challenges when this kind of, first started out?
I got to tell you, Jay, probably last spring when we entered into our planning phase, which really was 3 days to get rolling. Now, we're a one-to-one district, so we had devices in kiddos' hands from grades 3 through 12. But that weekend, it's fair to say, was chaotic. We have a fantastic staff. We came back that Monday ready to roll. And from that point on, really, teachers and building administrators grew that process, built bridges via technology. And the unique thing is everybody was in the same stage school district-wise. We were all doing the same thing. It's just everybody had unique challenges based on what infrastructure they had. Pivoting into this year, we had plenty of time to plan, and our biggest planning tool moving forward when we met with staff was we were going to give our families choice so they could send their kiddos back to face-to-face, which we were in a hybrid, so it would be essentially half on days A, half on B. They could keep their kiddo at home and do live streaming, so we installed cameras to live stream in every classroom and set up a platform to make sure we could support that. When Sherry talks about the anxiousness, that's some of the anxiousness with our staff. Most districts, school districts, didn't, ubiquitously live stream prior to last March. And then also we have our own cyber option. So each of our families had one of three choices. And based on their comfort zone, they needed to make that choice and what was best for their family. I think that's really helped us as a system moving forward. But we've been very distinct. It's not a new normal. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to grow as a district. And again, Sherry alluded to, we have some very anxious moments, but really to a staff member, we see it as an opportunity to grow and continue to build bridges.
So Sherry, talking about the anxious moment. So, before we get into the opportunities, I wanted to talk about that. When this started out, like Dr. Fry said, we were all on this together. Nobody really knew how this was going to play out, where this is going. So what were some of those initial situations?
I think a lot of it is just getting used to being on camera for one thing, and that hearing your own voice, recording your voice for lessons, all of those things that kind of, I guess being a human. I know, like just in the lesson I just recorded, a few minutes ago, I thought I paused the camera and I didn't pause the camera. And so I'm like, the kids are seeing me and going like, oh no, shoot, I forgot to do that. And, that's part of my video. And, so it's that anxiousness of not being as perfect as I would like to be. And, the anxiousness of trying to keep everything organized with having, with the hybrid schedule, I see half of my class every other day. And so the anxiousness of being able to make sure that all of my kids are getting that continuity that they like or that they need, that's the thing for me. And to be honest, it hasn't been nearly as bad as I thought it would be. It was just getting over those, I think those personal hurdles that I have of, being okay to not be perfect, being okay to make mistakes on camera, being okay to forget what class is doing what, and just be like, okay, guys, I forgot you did this. I was thinking you did this, and, going on with it and letting the kids see that I'm a human just like them.
Yeah, that's interesting. So bringing that back to Anne, as a parent, usually you send your kid off to school and then, you deal with him or her when they come back. So what were their initial anxious moments for you when this whole thing happened and, didn't know?
In the midst of that anxiety, My son is gifted, so that's another layer into this, making sure that students have education that is appropriately challenging for them. One of my favorite quotes, though, is that the best education is a library of good books, and I can say, like, with some confidence that I feel a lot less worried about my kid checking all the boxes or doing everything perfectly, to your point, Sherry, and a lot more worried about him being engaged and curious at a time when there is so much anxiety and kind of an opportunity to really disconnect. I worry about this on the corporate side, but also on the educational side. When we're engaging through technology, how much are we fully present and engaged in that conversation? And so as a parent, I think my challenge is to keep his curiosity fueled and try and support the educators who are also working with him. If there's one other point that I think is worth making, it is that our teachers may not have always been valued in the way that they should be. So hats off to you for rolling with all of these transitions. And I hope that one of the things that comes out of COVID is that as parents who are kind of doing double duty as educators now, that we really start to appreciate and acknowledge the role that teachers play in our kids' lives and in shaping the future.
Yeah, so that's you make a great point about the valuing the teachers. So, but at the same time, in these times, everybody is playing different roles. Addressing panic, which you usually don't do. So, Dr. Fry, did your role change in any way? Did you discover something new about what you had to do?
It became very clear about day 2 of the challenge that we needed to over-communicate. My community needed to see me. Our teachers needed to see me. Our community needed to see our teachers. We just had to communicate. It's not that I had all the answers or our staff had all the answers, but it was important that they saw us. It's important that we communicated. And I think to Ann's point, it was also important that they saw vulnerability. And Sherry talked about trying new things. If we're not vulnerable, we're not going to grow. So we tried to, as a district, make ourselves vulnerable and embrace that. We had talked about that for several years prior. This certainly was the time to do that and move forward with that. And in doing it, we wanted to focus on, to Ann's point, engagement. Education is all about how we engage students and their families. And doing that across the screen was a new challenge for us consistently doing it across the screen. So how we measured for that engagement, how we tried to ensure that our students were in a good place from a social and emotional perspective. And really that's how we started off our face-to-face experience this year. It wasn't talking about academics. It was about, all right, where are you at? How can we help? What's going on at home? How can we help with that? All those kind of things to address the social emotional side, which, again, Jay, not anything new, but something we probably should be spending more time on prior to the pandemic that we're completely focused on as we work through it.
So touching, or following up on that point, Sherry, as a teacher, when your students are right in front of you, it's a different situation versus, in this scenario. So how do you read them?
With us being in the hybrid schedule, I do actually get to make some face-to-face connections with some of my students. So I'm not learning about them, solely virtually, which is very nice that I do get to see them face-to-face, and then I also get to see them virtually. But I think in my mind, I think I've done a good job of, checking in with my kids. And, one of the first things that, when we have a virtual meeting, one of the first things I, ask them is, what's something great that happened this week for you? Or, what's something you'd like to share with us that happened this week? And, and I say it doesn't have to be related to my class. It doesn't have to be related to school, just, anything. And that's kind of how we start our virtual conversations. I've also incorporated some tools that I use to kind of survey my students to find out what I could do better. Like, am I, just for example, one of my classes, they were receiving their assignments at 7:30 in the morning on their asynchronous days, and then they're due by midnight that night. And some of the kids said, it would be nice if we could get them, a little bit earlier, because depending on my, work schedule, depending on what I have to do at home as far as maybe taking care of siblings, it would be easier if I had my assignments a little bit earlier and had a little bit more flexibility. So, based on that feedback, I changed their assignments that they receive them at midnight the day before they are due, and then it gives them a full 24 hours to complete the assignments. And I'm trying to encourage kids to let me know if something's not working, or am I assigning too much work that it's taking you hours to complete. And I do have a 17-year-old daughter who's also a junior at Big Spring, so a lot of times when I'm doing my lesson planning, I'll say, hey Paige, is how long do you think this would take you to do? Is this something that's going to take you 2 hours to do, or is this something that's going to take you a half hour to do? Because I don't want to overwhelm my students. So I've been trying to just, connect with kids and say, this is new to me. What can I do better that's going to help you, so that, that they aren't overwhelmed? And I'm hoping by kind of opening that line of communication that kids will come to me if they're struggling with something. And I have found a lot of kids are emailing me with any concerns they have or questions they have, and I have to think that that's a good thing, that even though I'm not seeing them face to face, they're willing, every day they're willing to connect with me and ask questions, and I feel like I'm developing a relationship with them, and I hope that they're feeling the same way.
Changed. Yeah, so that frame of reference that you mentioned. So Anne, have you seen like your son, reaching out to you more around the schoolwork now than before, or
him? Still monitoring his grades and stuff, and a lot of trust in his educators and his teachers. I would say though that my role has shifted in some ways to being more of a coach or a supporter, and then to supplementing what I'm seeing that he's getting in school. So yesterday he was working on a lesson, I think it was actually through JA BizTown. It was about how to write checks, so some financial literacy. But my world in the business community is working with some of the largest banking institutions and looking at the future of banking. And honestly, our kids need to be thinking way beyond paper checks into what does currency mean, and how do we assign value to things. And so not as his teacher, but as a supplement to that, I want him to understand not just where we were 20 years ago, but where we're headed as a society. And so I think that that's been an interesting part of my role, is teaching what maybe won't come through the district.
This is really cool, because for me, the best part is when I bring together like incredibly smart people, the conversation kind of connects, before I get to the next question, that's kind of where you guys end up with. So, and you just touched on innovation. So, Dr. Fry, that's my next question. What's new that has introduced? Is it, from a technology, from a process-wise, that has come into this post-pandemic or world?
We have what's called a profile of a graduate at Big Spring, which 6 C's that we looked at, that we've had for 3-4 years. It really is it sets the tone for when our students walk across the stage, that we're confident they have specific competencies. Those skills aren't easy, and those competencies, aren't easy to test. But things like financial literacy and beyond, what it may look like in 10 years. It's not about writing a check. What does currency mean? How does it evolve? What's it look like internationally? So that our kiddos are ready to head into a global market with a base understanding of the skills they'll need, and the communication skills, how they need to collaborate, how they collaborate together from a video perspective in a global sense. We had all those goals prior to the pandemic, but honestly, this has been a fantastic dress rehearsal for bringing our profile of a graduate to life. And you don't catch that, you don't get that in a statewide assessment. Okay, you just don't. You get that from having kiddos engaged and having our staff understand that those attributes are just so important as we talk about our students being life ready. So whether they're going to run their own construction firm and the steps to get to that point, that they have the business acumen to do that, or whether they're going to go to higher ed, we need to make sure we're checking those dots, and then we built bridges with families to do that, much like Ann mentioned, that we continue to evolve. So Jay, I think the biggest thing is what we've been trying to do, this gave us the opportunity to really drill down to it. And it started last spring, and we're continuing that momentum moving forward.
So, Sherry, talking about innovations, right? I mean, the virtual part, being on the camera, is certainly one part of it. But what are some of the new innovations that you have seen
at Big Spring? And I've had our first virtual Friday. I tried to do kind of a not really. It was in a game format, but it was information about personal finances and things kind of related to the economy. And I tried to put the kids into teams in a virtual meet, and I put them in breakout rooms, and it was something that was really, it seemed like a really good idea up front. And so it was something that I learned that, okay, I need to do this better next time. I need to do that better next time. So it's a continual learning process of looking at what tools are out there and how to best use them. I've learned how to, like I said earlier, about how to video myself and teach a lesson so that the kids can, watch, see my notes and hear me explain how to do something and show them virtually how to do something, as opposed to me doing that in the classroom. And, one thing I will say, my husband is continually irritated by me because I will never take a day off of school. I'm always it's too much work to take a day off right now. I have this going on. I have that going on. And, one thing I have to say is now getting over that anxiousness of creating videos of myself. I'm thinking, okay, so I could maybe do some videos and, put a little more of the ownership of learning on my students instead of always taking, feeling like I'm the only one who can, I have to be there to tell them how to do it. So, there are, and there's so many tools and applications out there to do that. One app that I just recently learned how to use, it's called Idea Boards, and it allows students to put what look like sticky notes on. So I give them a question, and then they put a little sticky note onto the virtual screen or virtual board, and then I can see their responses, and then it also allows kids to vote on it. So last Friday, I asked my students, if you were, what's something you like about my class? What's something that you are disliking with my class? And, I told them, be nice, but be completely honest. And then I asked them to vote on those different things. And then it allowed me to go back later and I could look over all of those comments that they had. And, I just feel like there's so many tools out there. And, at Big Spring, we have instructional coaches that are, finding tools for us also as teachers, so I don't have to take all of that work on. Like my instructional coach, if I go to her, and she's the one who told me about the idea boards, and she said, here are a couple tools that might work for what you want to do. Why don't you try those out? And so that's kind of helped with some of that legwork of just going on and searching. They're finding, our instructional coach finds those things. She is, holding training sessions. She's helping out with lots of things that are happening. So, along with those innovations, we've, as Dr. Fry talked about our profile of a graduate, one of our key pillars is collaboration. And, we've expected that of our students, but we're also, as a staff, forced to, in a good way, to do more collaborating and, to work with one another and share ideas that maybe we weren't doing quite as much before the pandemic. So, there definitely are good things that have occurred and, things that are less comfortable that have occurred.
So, Anne, you and I have talked about innovation quite a lot, and even technologies. And so what are some of the things that you have seen that you would say that works from a parent's perspective, that kind of supports the current world we're in?
Lawanda's point over in the comments, I think that the most effective education is going to be individualized and tailored to that student. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot and was hoping would come up on this panel, Jay, is with that individualized and local education, I think one of the points that we need to talk about is the way that Pennsylvania's school districts, that there are so many school districts in Pennsylvania, and how that allows a local education, but also may act as a limiting factor too, in terms of efficiency and things like that. In terms of innovation, I think one of the things that's really interesting, especially working in technology, and Jay, I think you and I have talked about this, is that when we think about an experience, a teacher in front of a classroom talking to students, what we've tried to do mainly is pick that experience up and make it happen the same way through a screen and a camera. And I feel like there's so much space for us to innovate in terms of what could technology open up for a student in terms of education. Think about things like AR and VR and video and the ability to talk to experts who would never be able to make it into a classroom in one of our school districts in person. So I'm really excited about seeing more innovations in this way, but also a little bit, I don't want to say disappointed, because I think we're all doing the best that we can. I don't want to see us as a society miss an opportunity to create something better by settling for replicating what we know or are comfortable with. And there is vulnerability in those conversations that I hope that we are able to have going forward.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because one of the comments, it's a pretty detailed comment from a parent, and so I know Lavanda McCoy very well, and so she said, I feel the transition from home to school has missed a valuable area most parents don't prepare kids for outside of learning ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. What, how, where, when do I learn about me, meeting others, and influence along with the pressure from school? Seeing yourself, your gifts and talents and esteem goes a long way and hand in hand with learning. I think where she's trying to get to is the whole social engagement part of it. How do you see that, right now in this environment?
This is an opportunity for school districts. And when you look at Lawanda's thoughts, we're looking at making sure our graduates are life ready and that their learning experiences are relevant. But that starts, on third, fourth, fifth grade, where we expose them. So we look at the elementary level exposure, at the middle school experience, at the high school pursuit. And in that process, there's a ton of relevance to what students' passions are, and they can personalize that. If we're missing that, we're not doing our job, okay? And how we collaborate with other districts to provide it, maybe we don't have the means individually to do it at Big Spring. So we collaborate with other districts around us to make sure that our students have the opportunity to go out. So on the back end of the educational experience where Ms. Powell deals with, we have a large percentage of our students doing internships to get that relevance, to give them a dress rehearsal. But that takes relationships with folks like Ann and the company that she represents, just so kids can see that real world, and then our classrooms have to support that process. So it's not about ABCs. It really, obviously, they're still important, but the whole accountability model that was essentially cemented 20 plus years ago is tragically flawed. And if we don't get beyond that during times like this, when we have an opportunity to do it, we're selling public education short. And that's what we're trying to focus on.
The elementary and the middle school levels, other than from my own children's experiences, but at the high school level, as a business teacher, I've always it's always been a goal of my departments to make sure that we're teaching kids things that they can apply elsewhere, so that they're not just memorizing how to do something or learning how to do something on a worksheet or whatever. We want them to be able to apply those things. And helping, been working with the cooperative education coordinator at Big Spring, and setting up internships for kids to explore those different opportunities. To see, there are lots of kids aren't sure what they want to do when they graduate from high school, and by having those internships available, students they have the opportunity to go out and experience, what it's like to work in this field. And if they find out they don't like that, then the next marking period they can go someplace else. Or if they find out they do like that, then they can continue pursuing that and, go into a different level maybe, or even look at a different business to do it, to see a different perspective on it. So I feel like at Big Spring we are really moving toward helping kids with having authentic learning and doing things that, okay, yes, this is math, but this is how math works in the business world. This is how math works in, this type of office or, or this type of business. And I do think that we're doing a really good job with that. And that's something that I think a lot of teachers really support in our district, and I think our students are very lucky to have those opportunities. And we are also working not just with our district, but we work with other districts in the county and even beyond the county to set up experiences for our students. So maybe it's not something that we have enough students at Big Spring that are interested, but maybe if we look at some of the surrounding districts, all of us can put together enough kids that, a business is willing to help us, do whatever. Like, we have opportunities at UPMC, we have, opportunities at Sea Park, just a number of businesses in the area, and they're allowing our students to be workforce ready or college ready, whatever it is that they want to pursue when they leave our building. We're trying to give them those opportunities and ensuring that they have those opportunities, that they can move into the next stage of life feeling pretty comfortable and confident with the choices that they've made.
I don't have a good answer for that. I'm concerned about the way that our kids are learning to build relationships with other people. I also think that public education plays such an important role in terms of access and exposure for kids who may not have an environment in which it's great for them to learn. And so I do think that there are some major gaps today with education as we see it in both of those areas as we wrestle with either hybrid or distance learning or all of these models, how we address those social needs and then the accessibility and inclusivity of our communities. I don't have a great answer, Jay.
I could chime in on that. I think what Ann's alluding to for us and the whole empathy side of public education and that we're the fiber of a sound democracy. Our students have to have or grow the ability to disagree, but disagree in a way that helps move us forward. And that empathy is something that I think we all are worrisome about, given current culture and challenges. And that's a huge part of our profile of a graduate. And we try to expose our students to uncomfortable situations and vulnerable situations where they talk themselves through and maybe disagree with a classmate, but understand the appropriate way to go about disagreeing and grow from that and understand others' point of view. It's sad sometimes when we see things going on around us that don't model that. And the generation coming out now as graduates have to do better than what some of us are seeing today. And really, that's our role as public school employees to work with them and expose them to that and help them grow.
Yeah, so that, I think we're now touching on one of those subjects which, is sensitive, but at the same time it's really important and relevant in the sense of, even before the pandemic itself, with the technology, the kids were having less physical interaction, social interactions, and so now that has completely been removed from the equation, or mostly. And then you have kids that in some school systems, and parents like Ann's, and where the technology is available, Wi-Fi is available, they're in a different learning environment. And then you have kids who are struggling to connect, does not have that. So how do you balance all of this? Maybe Sherry, as a teacher, you have a mixed group of kids in your class.
I try to be very approachable for my students, and I do look at things. I didn't grow up with having everything in my household either. So when I look at different things that I expect from my classes or different ways that I, cover a subject, I always try to look at it from the perspective of, okay, what if this kid, doesn't have all of the things that a typical kid has? Or what if this, I teach a personal finance class, and I have to be very careful about how I approach some subjects, because I don't want kids to feel bad because their parents may not have, or whomever they live with may not have the ideal financial situation. So I try to look at things from the perspective of, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It's a matter of learning how to budget that money appropriately. Or, it doesn't, you don't have to be rich to invest in or have, a large income to be able to invest in this or that. So I do try to look at things from all different perspectives. And, I have to say I don't know exactly how I do it other than just trying to be approachable. But I do find that in most of my classes, most kids are willing to, share a little bit or share their perspective. And I don't know if this is just something that, that is a culture in our community at Big Spring, or maybe it's just a culture that I'm able to see it from the perspective of my classroom. But students are generally respectful in my classroom whenever they're sharing ideas. And I feel like, a lot of kids, I encourage them to participate and, share their experiences, because I want everyone to know that, just because, your lifestyle or just because your life is like this doesn't mean everyone around you is. And so I do always try to look at from different perspectives. And even like requesting students to do certain things. I try to think about, if I'm asking kids to, I don't know, like, talk to different people in the community about something, I always try to think about, okay, are they going to have an adult they can ask for help to do that? And, trying to look at different ways that I can give kids choices so they don't feel feel inadequate because they can't do one thing. So if you don't want to do this part of the assignment, then here's an alternative for that, so that kids have a way of being able to do what's expected without feeling like they're inferior to their classmates. And so I'm not really sure how I find that out, other than, just human perception and just trying to be aware of not everybody has, the same thing.
Yeah, and I think you both shared about the vulnerability part. I think being vulnerable yourself is kind of one of the ways you open the kids also to be, to open up more.
Not grow up in a place where everyone looks like him and everyone thinks like him. Part of that is being purposeful about the way that we spend our time and our money. I want, for me personally, one of the things that really changed, I grew up in Shippensburg, right, so the next district over from Big Spring, and went to Lebanon Valley College. Studying abroad was so wonderful to me, because at that time in Shippensburg there wasn't anyone who looked different than I did. So I'm so thankful for the gifts of travel, and now that we can't just hop on a plane, I think that exposure comes as a responsibility of parents and teachers to say, and to Sherry and Dr. Fry, thank you for having that kind of empathy and putting kids in touch with community members and teaching what it is to have a respectful civil discourse where we explore ideas together. You're right, Dr. Fry, that it's fundamental to a functional democracy to be able to do that.
Let's switch to the post-pandemic, because we're almost coming up, and there's a bunch of questions lining up. So as I thought, this would be one of those sessions which will get people worked up, or
So things like live streaming, really, that's not cutting edge technology. Higher ed's been doing it for years, but the pandemic has forced us to make sure that our families can engage in that manner if that's their choice, if that's how they want to go about it. Beyond the pandemic, I can see us utilizing tools like live streaming. If Ann wants to take his son, if they're going to Italy for a week, they could conceivably live stream and to check back in and share experiences from Italy as you go through that. There's no better learning than that for classes and for students. So those kind of things are obvious. But I think the one other point I alluded to, that I really believe this is our time to absolutely develop and move forward with local accountability systems and look at true accountability. What our communities hold us accountable for. Not with the federal government, not the Department of Education, but what's important to our community and how we help shape that global citizen, that they can be a productive global citizen. That is not addressed in a standardized test. So that's all about relationships with employers, exposure, and those soft skills. That when Solarity's interviewing folks, they're looking at soft skills. They're looking at dispositions. That's how we try to hire our folks now. And that's really what the skills we want our students to have moving forward, that will make them productive and life ready. So it's time, and this is the opportunity to set that. As you can tell, I wouldn't call myself anti-test, but Big Spring has a much larger story to tell than test scores. Not because of the results of our test scores, but because that's what our kids deserve. And now's the time for that.
One of the things that we talk about, in our building is, critical content. What are the things that we absolutely want our kids to know how to do when they leave, and not necessarily looking at, what's the test going to ask them, but what do we want our kids to be able to know how to do and be able to function to be, a productive citizen, as opposed to just being able to say, oh, I aced the Keystone exam, but I don't know how to apply that information. So, I really hope that we continue with a lot of things that we're doing. And I feel like as a teacher, this has actually allowed me to let my students learn more, and I don't know how this is going to sound, but learn more on their own, because I've given them activities that they can do, but they get to look at it more from their perspective, instead of being in my classroom and, me being there to continually guide them through each step of it. It's very nice to see see the kids do their own critical thinking and say, okay, this is what Mrs. Powell asked for, and this is the take I have on it, and doing it their way, instead of, trying to do everything in that cookie cutter shape that, a lot of time as education previously we tend to do. So I really am enjoying the fact that students are thinking more outside the box, because I'm not there to continually answer their question, while they're in my classroom. And I mean, the kids still email me, and I'm glad that they do. But there's that less of that. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? It's more that they'll do it, and then, I shouldn't say hope that they do it right, but it's just giving them that more independence look at it, and also helping them to be advocates for when they really have a problem, reaching out and saying, okay, Mrs. Powell, I don't understand this. Could you please clarify this? And, that's good to see, instead of, just, like I said, constantly just checking, do one thing and say, okay, is this right? Is this what you wanted? I think it's giving the students more confidence in what they're working on. And, I really enjoy seeing what kids, have been coming up with. And I just gave an assignment last night, and I started looking over what the kids did. And I mean, I was glowing when I looked at their results of the project, and I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, because it's something I haven't done before. And, I was looking at, I'm like, oh my goodness, these students did such a great job. And they did this, outside of class on an asynchronous day, and without my, constant direct instruction of how to do it.
I wonder if that may also have kind of a flip side of, and we see this economically too, between the divergence between haves and have-nots. So I think that that's something that I would want to really keep an eye on as we look forward to how things change. To more directly answer the question, I want to refer to a novel that I enjoyed tremendously a couple of years ago, called Ready Player One. It was also made into a movie, but in this novel it envisions a future society where we're interacting a lot through augmented reality and through virtual reality, through goggles and things like that. And it's sort of sci-fi, and I don't know that we'll get there, but in this book, education is delivered completely virtually, and I think that the pandemic forced us to move closer in many ways to that imagined future. I hope that our education drastically changes, that we retain the best pieces of what Dr. Fry and Ms. Powell really work so hard to have in their classrooms, that empathy, that future citizen and future leader. But the ways in which we do that, the accessibility, the way we leverage technology for those opportunities, I think that we can and should and have to change.
So what's the one, so now we kind of talked about the post-pandemic world, and, I think we're maybe 5 more minutes. So one of the questions I certainly want to get out there is, what's the one advice you would give, a parent, an administrator, or a teacher who is, trying to figure this out? There are a lot of people that are still struggling, trying to come to terms with this, understand this, what's the best.
If it's not going If they're struggling with something, if they need something, we need to have open communication so we're aware of that and we can help address it together. So communication is really critical on that. And then also utilization of tools that are out there to help support it, whether it's from the district, outside the district. We have a virtual resource room that's staffed during asynchronistic days so that students can pop on into that resource room, talk to a live person, get some help. We need to take advantage of the tools. As educators, we're curators. Okay? It's not about being sage on the stage. And to Sherry's point, there's no more fulfilling moment than providing an opportunity for some growth and seeing students take advantage of that and grow beyond where they were with a project. It's not about getting a score for a test. Most kids today know how to play school very well. That doesn't always challenge them to learn. So that communication, that support, utilizing the tools around us are how we grow, and that's what we need to expect, and that's what we need to support.
One of those things that, kind of made me anxious at the beginning of the year was trying to be so planned out. And I think you need to look at what needs to be done today and how I can do those things best today. And then, when tomorrow gets here, we'll deal with tomorrow. And just trying to look at things that are, from a perspective of I don't have to save the world today or, save the world, but I need to at least look at, my group of students who are, with me today and to work on them and give them the best that they need today. I also think that looking at the small things, one of the things I do to get to know my kids, my students is I try to look at, what are they involved in? If they're involved in sports, I make a point of saying, how did your soccer game go last night? Or how was the football game? Or how are you going to do tonight? And, when kids tell me that they have a job, like, oh, where do you work? And, oh, that's great. What do you do? And how do you like that? So I try to connect with my kids on that personal level too. And I think, so often we get so busy doing things that we forget about, what's really, really important in life. And, in my own life outside of school as a parent and as a wife, the pandemic made me sit back and say, okay, Sherry, was it really that important that, everything was planned out to a T and that every moment of your day went, just, as scheduled? And it gave me that opportunity to sit back and, get to know my daughter, a little better. 17-year-old daughter isn't always so open to talk, but when she's stuck home with mom for 6 months, she starts to talk to me. So, I look at that from, we just need to look at the small hurdles that we have in front of us.
But I would also say that if there's one piece of advice, it is we can't afford to settle. We can't afford to say, just because this pandemic is unprecedented and hard and we're juggling a lot, that we can sacrifice quality or ideals or a hope for a better world. And so I think that the advice is to keep reaching and working harder to build the kind of future that we want to have. And I don't see that there's room to pause and to reflect and to narrow our scope, but not room to compromise on quality and what it means to do great work.
So unless any of you have any last points, I want to wrap up here because we are running out of time. So first, I want to thank all of you, Anne, Sherry, and Dr. Fry, for spending an hour. I think this is really valuable for a lot of people because, like we said in the beginning, everybody's in the same boat. And it's good to know. It would have been shocking if you guys said this is exactly how we solve it, because then people would have been freaking out. But I'm glad we didn't get to that. It's like we are all trying to figure this out and collaboratively. And I think you raised a lot of the points about the social connectivity part. So I really thank you.